If I can spend time on marketing efforts, which is Twitter to some extent, still going to conferences, maybe I can go capture 5 potential prospects in a couple of hours or something like that. That's a better use of my time than spending 5 hours taking in sales calls. So I'd rather hire someone to handle the sales calls, and then I can maybe do higher leverage activity, which is try to drive volume into the funnel through marketing activities.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Small Business Mentor podcast, where we shine a light on the black holes of business growth with your host, Alan Pence. In each episode, we explore the leaps and bounds entrepreneurs make as they push their businesses beyond the 1 million mark into the realm of professional sustainable growth. Stay with us as we navigate the journey from brute force to finesse.
All right. Well, welcome to the pod. We have Chris Williams with us today with System 6. And Chris is my favorite example of the independent sponsor entrepreneur who got into this and did it the right way. So we're going to talk a little bit about Chris's background, how he got into this and his business. And Chris, welcome to the pod. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Alan. Happy to be here. Got into it in the right way. I don't know. Give me a couple more years and then we'll see. We'll look at the scoreboard then. But certainly, it's been fun meeting you, talking about DC the other day where I grew up and where you're at now. And this whole small business acquisition world is crazy, but really fun to be in. Yeah,
exactly. Well, Chris moved on to nicer pastures and in Northern California, or the Bay Area. And I'm stuck here in sweltering humid DC. As I call
DC,
it, Jakarta on the Potomac, as I call
it. DC is hot in the summer, but I mean, seriously, like if my life hadn't, I moved out here, met my wife, like we're building a family here, DC would be on the short list if California wasn't kind of where life has taken me. So
I appreciate your pity, Chris.
I do miss it.
So tell us, like, what was your background before you acquired?
Yeah, so I bought System 6 in July 2021. Before that, I'd had, I guess, a relatively sort of typical finance career. I started out of college in investment banking, did that for a couple of years, and then worked in private equity at a large firm. That's what brought me out here to California. Honestly, like, really enjoyed my experience in sort of finance, investing. I thought I went to business school and I thought long and hard, honestly, about going back. Like a lot of people in this acquisition world, I think, hated their experience in sort of big corporate, and I really didn't. But when I found out about the path of you can acquire and run your own small business, I went to business school to explore what could it look like to be more of an operator, driving results, as opposed to sitting on the board and sort of asking other people to drive results. And when I discovered the path of like, hey, look, you can go buy your own small business and grow it and run it yourself. I mean, to me, that is like the most go deliver results or not. Like, it's all on us in the leadership seat in these small organizations. And yeah, so that was my path to buying System 6 was, 5, 6 years in finance, business school. And then, went out, took on a bunch of debt, like we've joked about, and bought a small business.
So you are like SMBX, I think.
Yeah, I'm the dude who's like, sat at the high floor of an office building and like lived behind the spreadsheet and PowerPoint for 5 years, and then went to the complete other end of the spectrum with no operating experience and bought a small business. Yeah, I am definitely the stereotype that gets made fun of. I'll own it. I've got my vest. If it was winter, I'd be wearing my System 6 vest. So the old Dennis Green coach, they are who we thought they are. I'm definitely, in that stereotype a little bit.
How big was the business when you bought it?
Yeah, we were about 18 people, $2.5 million in revenue, in July 2021.
And how long did the search take you to get that?
I spent about 9 months. Like, I started searching in earnest kind of like August, September of 2020. So I guess 10 or 11 months, but there were some periods of lack of focus in there, but under a year.
Wow. That's amazing. And then the company is largely focused on bookkeeping.
Yeah, so we're an outsourced finance service provider right now to small businesses. So it starts with bookkeeping. Our core engagement is like, we want to do your bookkeeping, we want to do your payroll, pay your bills, do your invoicing. We're really trying to be the day-to-day finance team to our small business customers. most of
What
our
would you
clients
say
are
like the average kind of company is that your client?
yeah, like $5 million of revenue, 30 employees. Usually we are dealing directly with the owner, and they don't have time to, nor should they be spending their time paying bills, running payroll, invoicing customers. We're going to do all that work, obviously do the bookkeeping, get them financials that are useful to them. We're not their CFO. That's a division we'll probably try to build over time. We're really just the day-to-day team.
And have you've been growing the company since? Anything you can tell us?
Yeah. We've basically doubled in 3 years. So we're I would say we've doubled revenue and headcount. So we're now 38 people, about 4.5 million in revenue. So just under doubling revenue. EBITDA profitability has not doubled. It costs money to grow. And we're building out sort of a leadership structure that wasn't here when I bought the business. So that's where a lot of our margin has gone. But that's important because we don't want to just go from 2.5 to 5. We want to go from 2.5 to 10 to 50. That's a long journey. That's a 10 plus year journey. But you have to have pieces in place beyond just me in leadership. So that's been a big part of where our expenses have gone the last, I'd say, year and a half.
And this is something I talk about and write about a lot, but I kind of first experienced when I was working with Greg Crabtree, when I first started working with him. And it was all about how to get over 5 million and building that infrastructure and the profitability going down. And for me, it was like I hired the wrong people, grow up to that, and then we wouldn't be making any money, and then we'd lose a little money, and then I'd have to redo the people and then go back up. And it took me like 3 or 4 years to get through that $5 million. But it sounds like you've been really intentional about how to invest.
Yeah, I mean, I look, we made plenty of mistakes and we'll keep making them. But I do think, I hired a salesperson about 15 months ago at this point, Tim, who you've actually met at some of these conferences. That was a big part of it. Was I was starting to become a bottleneck, and we were definitely losing out on opportunities because I was the salesperson. So hired a salesperson. We also put someone in place as head of HR, fully dedicated HR person at, basically end of 2022. So that was at probably 25 people. So to have a full-time HR person at 25 people is definitely early, I think, for a lot of organizations. But our business is 100% a people business. Like we talk internally, people are the product. That's what we're delivering to our customers at the end of the day. So we should have someone fully focused on that. So just being willing to take the hit on margin earlier. And I think that's kind of the beauty with a lot of these small business acquisitions is the previous owner had built a great business and he was cash flowing it and he didn't want to make those investments to keep growing it. And I get that, he owned it all on his own. So he was putting away basically $1 million of profit every year. So for him to take it from 2.5 to 5, he knew that was going to mean less money in his pocket for the next few years. So I think he was, and this happens a lot, small business owners got a great cash flow thing, doesn't want to reinvest, take the hit for the next few years. So they're happy to kind of sell it to the next person and let them take that hit and try to grow it. And that's kind of exactly the journey we're on.
And you hired Tim at where do you think you were in revenue when you did that?
We would have been probably, so we finished last year at 4.2. We finished the year before that. We were probably 3.2 run rate or something like that.
I mean, I feel like that salesperson hire, I did the wrong thing 3 times in a row. I called being our salesperson was like being Darth Vader's admiral. It's like a great job, but you're not going to be there long. It really wasn't until we were over 10 million that I was able to get a really good salesperson. And partly that was just me. I promoted a lot of internal people and who were kind of good at selling to clients that we had, but didn't know how to really build a sales system. So that was a pretty risky. I mean, hitting it on a salesperson at that size is 1 out of 10 do that.
And I think we've hit it in some ways, and in some ways we haven't hit it. And Tim will totally own this. And I think it's just understanding, are you comfortable with what you're going to get and what you're not going to get? So Tim had been in the seat before, had sold and closed outsourced accounting services for 5 years before at a competitor of ours. And he's been fantastic at that. I mean, leads are coming in, he's working them really aggressively. He's able to price well. He's had to learn. We price differently. We have a different scope of services than where he came from. So I had to kind of learn how to work with our service team to make sure we're getting proposals that are useful. But one lesson I learned is like hiring a salesperson does not necessarily mean you're hiring someone who's going to drive more into the top of the funnel. Like Tim is definitely fantastic at receiving and closing and is working at sort of sourcing and driving his own business, but he's not, that's not where he spends most of his time. And he would admit like that's not his core strength, is like having a network that's going to generate leads. So I feel like we have gotten a fantastic person who's selling, closing, making sure clients, are transitioned appropriately to the service team. But we do need to go build more of a like top of funnel. And that's really more of a marketing engine than it is a sales engine. But yeah, don't like, mistake made. Look at my budget that I'd set last year and look at what we did, even though we closed a lot of business. Like I kind of did the rookie, hey, we're going to hire a great salesperson and they're going to go double top of funnel. Like it doesn't work that way. It's often two different functions, top of funnel and then actually executing on that funnel.
And again, like you have limited funds, right? So you have to invest where you can invest. And I love hearing about those choices you got to make, right? But I think, first of all, the ability to hire someone who was in a similar company, a competitor, that's great if you can find someone like that. Obviously sometimes it doesn't, but it's like at a company like this where, especially you not being, a lot of times people who found a bootstrap a company, they are the salesperson. But buying a company, you're more a financial person. You're not necessarily sales oriented. And so you don't necessarily know how to set up a sales system for this kind of company. So bringing in someone experienced like that is definitely worth it in those kind of circumstances. A lot of times I say when it's smaller, like just figure out how the owner can sell more because that's how they got where they were. But for your case, yeah, it's a little different.
So I jumped in, and I think everybody should do this. Yeah, I sold a lot in the first 18 months, but I didn't build a sales system. I was just like, and I did 180 sales calls. I had a way I was taking notes, but I didn't have a CRM. My CRM was Google Sheets because that was what was efficient. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the decision I was making. There were two candidates we were thinking about hiring. One had I would say was a more senior salesperson that had a network that he could probably prime and, drive more leads out of, but had been in larger organizations where, yeah, he hadn't set up HubSpot before. And he also hadn't sold exactly what we do. Like he had sold to CPAs, but really sold more software to CPAs. Who then ultimately are working with small businesses. So I kind of made the decision, yeah, like let's get someone who I know can sell day one and can also like design HubSpot because he's used it before at a very similar company. And you know what? It'll be my job to go continue to drive top of funnel. And yeah, I think that's just the way to think about it is like who can set up the system, who can actually sell, and then who can build the funnel. And that may not be the same person. You got to decide what you want, what you don't want.
Almost never is, right? And so I think that marketing is a distinct function. Obviously, you don't have the ability to go hire, high-priced people who know how to do all that stuff in each function. So you got to kind of cobble it with what you can. But I do think that's a really important distinction for people to understand is like marketing and sales are not the same thing. Generating leads and then closing are totally different skill sets, I think.
Yeah. And just think about like leverage sort of and value of time. It's like if I can spend time on marketing efforts, which is, Twitter to some extent, still going to conferences, maybe I can go capture 5 potential prospects in a couple of hours or something like that. That's a better use of my time than spending 5 hours taking in sales calls. So I'd rather hire someone to handle the sales calls, and then I can maybe do higher leverage activity, which is try to drive, volume into the funnel through marketing activities.
You're getting leads through Twitter and just like going to business kind of conferences. Is that the main activities?
The sort of search fund, independent sponsor, ETA, like small business Twitter, self-funded community, whatever you want to call it, has become where most of our new business comes from. We add about 40 clients a year. That's what we did in 2023. We're on track for 40 to 45 new clients this year. 75% of those plus or minus are basically people who bought a business in the last year. Maybe it's a small private equity firm. Maybe it's a traditional search fund person. Maybe it's an independent sponsor. Maybe it's a self-funded searcher. But most of our new business is coming from people who just bought a business and need to upgrade their finance operations.
Oh, okay. So you cannot, I'm not asking for anything unique to any client, But just as a class, do you think that these companies are doing well and like performing after the acquisition, or like what? Do you have any idea of that?
Yeah, so I think that like the vast majority are, when people are buying a business in a good industry. Yeah, we have, I can pull it up, but probably 45 or so now total kind of, hey, I just bought a business type clients. And the ones that are doing well are generally people who bought growing industries that have good revenue profiles. Like, yeah, the ones where there are challenges, it's people who bought businesses in really cash intensive, maybe manufacturing businesses where you have a complete mismatch between cash coming in and cash going out, or project based businesses. I think that's really what it comes down to. Like, yeah, there's some operators that are better than others, but everybody's kind of a rookie for the most part. And they're all making mistakes, myself included. But for the people who buy in a good industry, they're able to manage. But it's the people who buy in sort of project, really cyclical businesses that we are seeing definitely some people struggle.
So interesting. So great distinction there is to really focus, and obviously most people are, but you don't need to be in like SaaS software, right? It's just like you need to be in like industry that's growing, that has maybe a little bit longer contracts, right? You're not doing like a project and then.
Or it doesn't even have to be contracts, but just like consistent form of revenue. I mean, we have a bunch of HVAC home services guys who are generally doing well because there's some cyclicality throughout the year with weather, but generally speaking, there's always some demand for home services and they have to go capture it. It's not recurring at all. I mean, some of them are starting to put maintenance contracts in place, but it's still there versus like, we have some clients, who bought manufacturing businesses that are, selling parts to big, they're a tiny part in a supply chain to a big industry. And like that industry is going through a contraction right now and there's like nothing they can do. So obviously software or some other form of like contractual recurring revenue is amazing, but just something where there's consistent demand, home services, landscaping.
Plus, and bookkeeping, what I love too about this is like, it's not the biggest cost to them. And it's something that they need, but it's not like optimizing it isn't going to change their business. Right. So like their willingness to like move on from someone that's doing a good job is pretty low. I would assume. Right.
It's generally like 1% to 2% of revenue. When you're including payroll and bill pay and sort of the whole back office. And yeah, I mean, you're right. Like doing it better, doing it 99 percentile versus like 90th percentile is maybe not a huge ultimate change to the client. And that means that, yeah, like there's generally stickiness with what we do. One of the downsides of our industry is there are a million competitors. Like anybody can start a bookkeeping business. There's a bunch of competitors now on Twitter, serving the space that we're in. So we still have to try to deliver excellence, but yeah, it's not something that gets swapped out as much as maybe, I don't know, your recruiters that you're using. If you make one bad hire with a recruiting firm, you're probably going to move on to another one. Like there's a little bit more tolerance in what we're doing.
Or like like a marketing firm, right? Where like the better they do, the more revenue the company makes. And like, it's very direct. They can see that. And if it's not working, it's not working. Bookkeeping is like, okay, I need this. And as long as it performs, like, I don't know, like how much are they really going to save on it by going to someone else? And like, is it worth their time? Is that what they need to be optimizing right now? Right. Probably not.
It's mission critical. I think what we do, which is we pay bills, we do payroll, we are stepping into things where there's probably less tolerance for mistakes. Like, yeah, if your bookkeeping's off for a month, that's okay. But if we screw up payroll, like we're going to be out of there. But on the flip side, like I want to be doing sort of as sticking as many fingers kind of into our clients as possible. Cause that's just, as long as we do a good job, it makes us even stickier. It helps protect us against AI. I think if you're just doing very simple bookkeeping, you're going to be in trouble in a few years. So that's why we're trying to do more than just the bookkeeping. But yeah, it's a good industry.
And then moving, it sounds like how much do you think you can grow with the customers? So like, do you think you can take on like where do you think do you have a revenue cutoff, you think, where it's no longer?
So one thing that we've seen happen is customers will hire a controller and then maybe we will lose some of our scope. But we even still, when a customer hires a controller or a CFO, like that person doesn't want to do the bookkeeping. They don't want to do the basic payroll processing. So we could, I think, we could grow more with customers if we were offering CFO or more formal kind of controllership services. But honestly, like the big transition off point has been either when someone gets big enough where they need to leave QuickBooks Online, like we don't manage them on QuickBooks. We don't manage anything other than QuickBooks Online. So if you get to 30 million bucks of revenue, maybe you're going to go to Sage or NetSuite or something more of a mid-market software solution. So we would lose a client at that point. Or, like if they start to get above, I think once they get above 15 million in revenue, they do think about it because there's still some drawbacks to us being remote and not being in their office, so to speak. If they've got inventory moving through, there's definitely some benefits that, having an in-house team provides. So clients definitely look at it once they get above 15 million, but honestly, we haven't seen a ton of churn above that point.
Is that the demarcation point for a controller, do you think?
The conversation starts happening at 10. I think that like at 10, there's stuff that we're doing that is effectively a controller. And then, as they just keep getting a little bit bigger, they start to ask themselves, hey, is it time for me to go spend 150 grand on a sort of full-time person who's just managing all of finance?
We went through all that. It's the back office costs really mount as you grow, right? So you mentioned, let's just hit real quick on the AI stuff. So you think AI is kind of coming for the basic bookkeeping activities?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely coming. And I think, look, there's a chance, like the big question, there's a chance in 10 years, the big question is like, we might be pretty screwed in 10 years. But I just don't think anybody knows that. It could be a ton of leverage. And I think what probably happens is it makes what we do look a lot more like systems administration, where we're really just implementing and overseeing whatever QuickBooks looks like in 10 years from now, whatever Gusto payroll looks like. They're going to be a lot more automated. And it's our job to just kind of manage those systems for our clients. But yeah, I mean, even right now, the rumor is that like Intuit's got some pretty compelling AI stuff that they're going to roll out at some point this year that, yeah, for this super simple business is going to do 80-90% of the bookkeeping that right now you might be paying somebody $200 a month to do for you. Everything that we do is basically we implement and manage cloud-based financial products, payroll software, bill pay software, accounting software, invoicing software. All of those software companies are trying to implement AI and ChatGPT stuff as fast as possible. So for sure, it's going to be a part of our industry going forward.
I think, to be honest, it's going to take a while for it to get. Yeah, I think it'll do some low-level tasks, but it's the amount of human in the loop you're going to need to make sure it categorizes things the correct way, and this and that and the other thing, and teaching it and designing it. It's still going to be a high amount of involvement.
And you recognize it really only works if there's like pretty good data coming into the system, so to speak. And with these small businesses, often like there isn't, because, it's one thing if our client is a software company where all their expenses are coming in on a credit card, they're using Brex or Ramp or something like that, very consistent bank accounts across a bunch of different clients. And you could probably implement AI there. But we've got 180 businesses in a bunch of different industries. A lot of them still get paper invoices from vendors that they got to scan in. Like, you still need some human oversight in those processes.
The other thing I would be excited about is like talking a little bit, on the CFO side, is like if you could start using the data from your customers to better help them understand where their businesses are going. Like you could be like, hey, this is when the controller comes up, or this is when these things happen. Oh, you're, depending on the industry, depending on how many clients you have, like you could say like your margin profile is going to change in the next couple of years with your growth. And that's the stuff I think is going to get really exciting. And it's sort of CFO like, but it's just like financial kind of analysis, right?
You and I think of CFO. Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, companies got to be a lot bigger before it's truly a CFO. But yeah, it's basic benchmarking. We are not super industry focused, which one of the downsides of that is like, we don't have 60 clients in the same industry where we could spit out a benchmark report, which would be really useful. But I do think, AI should help with our client facing managers who are, really good accountants, really good at setting up systems, they're not as comfortable like providing advice because that's, for in an accountant's world, that's in the gray area of what should you do as opposed to it being a hard and fast accounting rule. But I think, if QuickBooks has some product that sits on top of it, there's already a bunch out there that try to call out, we've seen this expenses, starting to get bigger. It should, it may spike 3 months from now because we've seen that with other clients. Like those types of things should come over time. Yeah, like is it going to create really sophisticated CFO stuff? Probably not, but basic call outs, I think AI should be spitting that out in the next couple of years.
Well, and I think it'll give you the ability, like if you add that as I agree. I don't think the accountants are maybe the best people to do it, but it's like sort of like consultants on top of that. And then you can use that data set, right, to serve a lot more customers with a little bit of, higher level human input. So kind of talking about that, like how you manage the business. So one of the things we had been corresponding on X about was your concept about managing through pods. So kind of describe what that is and why you opted for that.
Yeah, so this is a structure I stepped into when we bought the business, but we have 5 service delivery teams. We call them pods. Each one has a team lead. That person is primarily a manager of people, and they help with onboarding new client work. They do maybe some of our most sophisticated clients on their teams. They are acting as the controller, so they're doing some service delivery, but it's supposed to be about 60 to 70% of their time is internal facing, managing a team. And then there's 3 client leads. Those are the client facing managers. Those are people that our clients are interacting with. Those are the people that, close the books, send over financials, ultimately process payroll. And then there's junior bookkeepers who are doing a lot of the transactional prep work. We have that set up for a couple of reasons. One, first and foremost, it's because we think it creates a better experience for our employees. Everything we have to do here at System 6 is first about, hey, what's the best thing for our team members? Because they're our business. So we kind of have to optimize for them first. And so we felt like if we put someone on a pod, sort of a 5 to 7 person pod, they've got a very specific manager. They're in a small, intimate team, as opposed to just being one of, 15 client leads kind of lost in a larger pool. We like the idea of creating a smaller environment that they're working in, and that makes them have deeper relationships with their coworkers, because it's kind of like they really feel like they work in a 7-person company that, we just happen to have 5 of those 7-person companies.
So let me just get this straight. So each pod has the same skill sets in it, sort of roughly. And each one operates sort of as like its own unit, rather than having like all the people who do book entry are just in one group across the company. There's one person or whatever assigned to each pod.
Yeah. The pods do have, some of them are more, this pod happens to have a bunch of HVAC and plumbing clients. So we'll tend to try and, push HVAC and plumbing clients when they come into that pod. But in terms of the services that they can deliver, they're all basically delivering the same services.
And it's sort of like a matrix management kind of idea.
Yeah. But then the other thing that's important is, like, for our clients, we want them to know that they're getting kind of a personal, but also team service. So they've got one person, their client lead, that's their day-to-day point of contact. They really feel like they work with that person often daily. But then, hey, there's a junior person underneath them, and then there's a manager above them. And so you have kind of always 3 people that are familiar with your account. But then because those 3 people sit in a group of 6 or 7, if something happens to one of those people, someone gets sick, it's much easier for someone to kind of jump in and fill the hole, versus if we were just pulling some random client lead from our pool of, let's say, 15 client leads to step in for Ashley when she goes out sick. Instead, we're asking, Ashley's peer, who's one of 2 other peers on that team, to step up for a week because Ashley went out sick. Like, that works better when it's in a smaller group, because let's say, we're pulling in Alan to cover for Ashley. Well, Alan's on this pod of 7 people with Ashley, and they know each other. We have huddles every week in that pod. Like, it's going to suck for you for a week because you got to step up, but you're more willing to do that when you are like in this close group with Ashley, versus when Ashley is just one of 15 peers of yours. So it's like that continuity protection is pretty important to our clients, and it works better when it's in a pod.
At some point, there'll be, you'll have to go from like a bunch of individual pods across the company to like some groups of pods, right? Then managed by someone on top of that, right?
Right now we have 5 pod leaders and a head of delivery who manages those. At some point, once there's like 8 or 9 pod leaders, she can't manage 8 or 9 pods. So we'll have to, I think what we'll probably end up doing is have like pods that focus more on sort of simple, regular kind of Main Street cash accounting businesses. And then we'll have like pods that are more focused on our accrual, sort of more sophisticated, sort of search acquired this world set of businesses. And then maybe there's managers of pod leads for each of those.
How do you think you'd incorporate like a CFO service? Would that be outside of the pod then?
Yeah, that would be outside of the pod. Same thing with tax, which we'll try to do over time. Is that person will engage with the client and, work with the pod just like they would work with a regular finance team, at a company if they were just doing CFO work at a company. And it'll be a bit of a different division, but they're just going to be working with our internal accounting staff versus, a different accounting staff.
How do you see this scaling? Like you said, 50 million, it's like maybe down the road.
Yeah, I mean, that's the BHAG. But I mean, I've written it down on paper so that the long-term goal is one-stop shop for recurring professional services to small businesses. I mean, we see it in their P&L. Like they're all paying for bookkeeping. Obviously, they're paying for taxes. We don't do taxes. We should do that. Generally, when they start to get about $5-6 million in revenue, we see some of them starting to pay, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month for a CFO. We should do that. So that's kind of like System 6 finance, tax, finance back office, and then CFO. And then, insurance, HR, those are adjacent recurring professional services that we could be getting into as well. I think CFO and tax is the first thing to go build. Like, let's just surround the clients with the finance needs that they have. But I think it would make a lot of sense for us over time to go buy an insurance practice, buy an HR consulting practice. We run payroll for 120 companies, but the minute they ask us, hey, can you help me figure out, the right benefits package? Like right now, we legally can't do that. And so we should be able to give them some HR advice as well.
Are you using offshore talent or global talent?
Yeah. We're just starting to look to hire international for the junior level work. And it's nothing against the domestic talent that we have here. It's just like we can't find it fast enough. Our number one problem as a company is like capacity. So if we can find more talent more quickly in other places, we'll hire there. We'll keep hiring here as well. But yeah, I would say I was slow to pull the trigger on that because, I bought a business. I didn't want to make a ton of cultural shifts. We were definitely a family style organization, I would say, when I came in, and, we've kind of grown through that. But for sure, I've heard a lot of good things about the international accounting talent, and we're actively interviewing people in a couple countries right now. So we're in the process of it.
Yeah, because one of the things I've been tracking is and this is sort of what I've been thinking through in my business too, is like the wages of onshore talent. And for us, that's like, a lot of that's directly billable to our clients. Those are not going down. They're going up. And our rates are under pressure at the same time. And I think everyone, every business owner's always got this problem, right? But I do think that in particular, like the inflation we're seeing and wages is not really, it's better than it was, but it's not going away. And my feeling is that the back office is going to be more and more under pressure to get efficient. And I don't know what you're seeing, but I started seeing, and, Greg Crabtree does some stuff on this where like back office costs really started escalating a year and a half, 2 years ago. So the question is like, can a company like yours come in and start being the way their offshore talent is very difficult because it's like you got to access it, you got to manage it. And then the other side of that to me is automation and to some extent AI, but really right now it's mostly automation, but it will become more AI. Like I think there's going to be a professional services play where you're basically bringing the back office to the company and implementing. They're getting the AI and the automation and the offshore talent, global talent through that back office through like a managed service provider, basically.
I think that's effectively even a lot of our competitors today are doing that in that they've already, they have a bunch of offshore talent that is serving clients. And we're doing that today with automation. Like we have an engineer who comes in and, builds things with Zapier or Make, or sometimes direct programs he'll write himself, like with VBA. But yeah, it's like these $5-10 million businesses, they don't have the need for a full-time automations person. They just need a couple of things automated. So we'll do that fractionally. They don't have the time to go, depending on their industry, but they don't have the time to go hire and learn international talent. Like that's our job. And then we sell that to you. I think you can say that with a lot of stuff. It's not just automation. It's not just back office. It's like, I think people are just realizing, look at it in the IT world, right? People are not doing IT in-house anymore. It's MSPs. Fractionalize everything basically, and then focus on your core, which is generally up through COGS. And then, a lot of your G&A, you should probably hand over to the experts who can deliver it probably better. Look at fractional legal support. SMB Law Group is starting that. There's a super successful search fund business that's in fractional general counsels, where it's, that's G&A, like let somebody else who's an expert in that deliver it for you. And sure, your effective hourly rate is higher when you're paying me to do it versus when you're paying somebody in-house.
Yeah, the other thing I think there's high potential for, and this maybe is into the industry specialization a little bit, but like once you build a bunch of automations and stuff for an HVAC client, can't those essentially be transferred to other people like very easily, right? So you start eating some of the software stack a little bit by building these automations.
Or even just learning. Right now it's like take Service Titan. So we've probably got 10 or 15 clients that are on Service Titan right now. And that's a selling point to us in the sales process, which is like, hey, you just bought your HVAC business. You want to get Service Titan in place, and then you want to integrate that with your accounting software. Like, rather than have to go learn that yourself, how to map Service Titan and QuickBooks Online correctly, like we've done that 12 times already. So we'll just do that for you. So even though it's not an automation that we've built that we can just go resell to somebody else, it's the knowledge of how to integrate. And that's valuable.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy who he ran ophthalmology clinics. And then, so he had to create a call center. So he basically built, global talent. And now he's selling that. So, because basically what he was able to do is record every call. Now he has this way, he built like a whole way of evaluating the calls and how those, and then it gives, like he built like little AI integrations where it now gives the call taker scores on what they did and how they can improve. So now he's selling that as a service to other ophthalmology clinics. And like nobody else is going to be able to get that level of data that he was able to get and then build it into the industry. And then that, as he sells it to the industry, he gets better and better and better. And it seems like you could do the exact same thing in some ways, right?
Yeah. These are the things I feel like that come with growth, which is like, I don't get to think about that at 4 million of revenue. I'm thinking about like, where do we get our next hires from? But yeah, again, when you're kind of in a growing industry that has some tailwinds behind it, like you can get to a size where you have a leadership team. We're not there yet. And then you can truly be a CEO or just kind of a like head of new business development. That's where, I've spent some time kind of looking at some of the most successful search fund, more traditional deals, of all time, and, learned about them and stuff in school. And like, that's where a lot, you look at, where does value creation come from? Most of it is tied to organic growth. And a lot of that organic growth ultimately comes from like starting new service lines or cross-selling, kind of like, how do you get more out of your existing customer base? And that this is exactly that, right? It's like, what can we figure out for a portion of our customers and go sell to them?
Well, I love these back office kind of companies now because I do think that you have that recurring service profile. It hasn't been bid up the way, like, look, I would love to own a SaaS business too, but I don't want to pay 25 times revenue or whatever it is, to buy it. So I think you bought right. It sounds like, man, I love, like, what I took away from it is like the ability to understand like where the company, first of all, you got the company, you're growing it, you picked a good industry with the right profile of recurring service. And then, able to put in that salesperson by going to a competitor's person, and then really understand the distinction between marketing and sales, and then seeing how over time you can like on services that work within that back office thing with that customer set. It's pretty impressive what you've done.
Yeah, it's just a couple of years in. I appreciate that. I mean, there's a lot. I think mistakes I've made, just to call a couple out, are, you get into this mode of, hey, I want to become a CEO as fast as possible, delegate so I can go, work on new business development ideas. Or in my case, there's a lot of M&A happening in our space. I do want to pay attention to that. And, every business book you read tells you how fast you have to delegate and get leadership in place. But I think one mistake I definitely made is certain things delegating too quickly, or delegating without training. Like there's, hey, hire a sales guy who's done it before. And I just kind of handed it off to him and he ran with it. But then, we have a fantastic HR leader, but she's primarily been like an internal HR person. And then sort of I delegated hiring pretty quickly to her. And we've had some missteps there where we hired some people we shouldn't have hired, and that's created, issues. So yeah, as much as, you want to grow and go work on new things to cross sell, or everyone wants to do M&A, that's the sexy thing on Twitter. Roll ups, is like, make sure if you're going to hand stuff off to your team that they're actually prepared to do it well, give them a chance to succeed.
Totally hear you. And that's what I think is that hard thing about getting over 5 million and then going up is like, you do need to get stuff off your plate so you can work on the next thing. But that you don't have the money to pay a bunch of super experienced people. Now, when you start hitting 10 to 15, you can start building like a full team of experienced people. And like, you can get an HR person that can implement a whole new system for you, right? But when you're 4, maybe isn't your top priority. You got to get the sales guy. So it is a bunch of trade-offs as you're going up.
I feel like at the size I'm at, you have capable people on the team who care a lot, which is incredibly valuable, who are willing to work their ass off for the company that they love, which is incredibly valuable. And the thing that you want to give them, they probably can do, but they need more resources to be successful in it. And I think that's where I've fallen short a little bit, which is just like, be very specific on what you want them to do. Don't just give it to them and assume they're going to run with it. Very specific on what you want them to do. And then also like, give them some training. Like you've got someone who cares, who's around whatever it is you need them to do. Maybe they're around sales, maybe they're around HR. You think they can step into it. Go pay someone 10 grand to train them a little bit. And then, you can't go afford to buy someone or hire someone for 150 grand, to do this full time who's a seasoned executive, but you've got somebody really solid. You just need to give them a little bit more of a chance to succeed. Invest in them.
That's awesome. Well, Chris, thanks so much for doing this. We are at time. We'll catch up again soon. I'd love to hear how the progress goes over the next couple of years.
I'll see you at Main Street in October. And by then, the hope is we have a head of talent acquisition in place. So you can hold me to that. That's our next big step.
All right. We'll do a short, like when we're there, and on how that's gone. So
yeah,
cool.
I'm probably going to say no and have an excuse, but that's
exactly. There you go. Somehow I doubt it, but thanks, Chris.
Right,
appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thanks for the time.
You've been listening to the Small Business Mentor podcast, brought to you by Alan Pence. For more insights on how to navigate your business through its black holes, visit @apence on X. Don't forget to search for Small Business Mentor in your podcast app to subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and here's to your next leap in business growth.